So to begin, you'll open the Survey123 app, and you'll select which survey you want to fill out. In this case, the title of the survey is White-Haired Goldenrod Community Science. To start a new survey, you'll click the Collect button at the bottom. And when the survey opens, the first few fields you'll see are surveyor. So this is your first name and last name. The second field is date and time, which is auto-populated when you open the survey, so you do not need to modify those. And the third field is site name, which you can select from this drop-down menu. And you can use the site name 999 Practice anytime you want to practice data collection. So you'll also notice that there are red asterisks by the headings of each of these three fields. That red asterisk means that the question is required. There are a few questions that are optional in the survey, but most are required. However, you do not need to worry about accidentally missing a required question because the app will actually not allow you to submit and upload a survey if you've left any of those unanswered. So after this point, the survey can be broken down into two main sections. The sections are automatically expanded when you open the survey, but I am minimizing them to give you an overview before going into more detail. So the first section in the yellow dropdown is for entering information about the white-haired goldenrod plants themselves, as well as the physical condition of the rockhouse habitat. The second section is for cataloging all other organisms within the rockhouse habitat. So this primarily involves identifying other plants present in the rockhouse. That's in the green background. You can also enter observation data on any wildlife or wildlife signs you see, and that is in the purple background. Now I'll expand the white-haired goldenrod section of the survey again and go through each of the questions there. The first question in this section is to select your rockhouse. Each site usually has a few separate rockhouses included, and each rockhouse within a given site is identified using a 4-character code, which is 3 numbers followed by a letter. So you'll be assigned one rockhouse, and you'll just pick one of these. And in this case, we'll scroll down to 999 Practice again and use that. The next question is the GPS location, and this, like the date and time field, is auto-populated with the exact coordinates of where you're standing when you start the survey. So if you are standing right at the assigned rockhouse when you open the survey, it'll record that GPS point. On the other hand, if you happen to start the survey at a different location, like back at the trailhead or the parking area to fill in some fields ahead of time, the app will record that location. So just be aware of that. And if you do start a survey at a location that is not immediately at the rockhouse, you can very simply correct the location when you're at the rockhouse by tapping the little locate icon at the top left of this map box. And that will update the coordinates to wherever you're standing. The next question asks about a fence. So several years ago, some of the white-haired goldenrod populations that were most at risk from trampling were fenced off with a low chicken wire fence, and signage was installed to alert hikers. Over the years, some of the fences are still functional and in decent shape, but others may have been vandalized or have had tree limbs fall on them or a variety of things that could damage the fence. So this question is simply asking you whether or not there's a chicken wire fence around the goldenrod plants at this rockhouse. And if so, does it look okay or does it need repair? So if it might need repair, you can select that option and a text box will pop up where you can give a brief description of the fence condition and what repairs might be needed. The next question is there a seep in the rockhouse habitat? Some of the rockhouses are rather dry, others have a lot of consistent year-round moisture due to the presence of groundwater seepage. So if there's no seep, then that's all you need to answer. However, if there is a seep, the question then expands to ask how large the seep is relative to the rest of the rockhouse habitat. And you can enter that in a number in intervals of 10. And then it asks you to take a photo of the seep. So unlike the photo monitoring portion of the data collection, you don't need to match the seep photo to previous year photos. So you can just take the photo from whatever vantage point you think captures it well. So you'll click the little camera icon. And we're just going to pretend that those footrests or seats or whatever they are the seep. Take that photo. And there you go. So the next question is, are there white-haired goldenrod seedlings present? This question is intended to give us a glimpse into the population demography and whether the plants are reproducing through seeds or whether they're just spreading vegetatively. So for this question, it's important to be able to distinguish between brand new tiny baby plant seedlings versus new rhizomatous growth, which white-haired goldenrod plants are inclined to do. And most of the populations are very clonal. So differentiating can be a little bit tricky if you're not sure whether you're seeing seedlings or not. So if you're not sure, it's okay to just put not sure or can't tell. But if you do see seedlings, definitely click yes. The next question is the photo monitoring growth trend. This is a question you should answer after you've done the photo monitoring portion of the data collection. And you'll compare your current photo with the last photo taken in the previous year's survey. And what you're wanting to determine is, does it look like the population has become patchier or sparser, or have individual patches shrunk, or have patches expanded or filled in, or have new patches of plants appeared? So if you're not sure either way, you can put stable. But if it looks like the patches or the whole population at the location is increasing, you can put that. If it looks like the patches are becoming sparser or they're shrinking, you can select decreasing. The next question is the fungal rust level on the plants. So there is an unidentified fungal rust that affects some populations of white-haired goldenrod. And generally, we tend to see higher levels of rust on plant populations in the high recreation impact sites compared to the more remote sites. So the thinking is that the rust may be at least partially spread around by human foot traffic, although there isn't a whole lot of solid data on this yet. The rust appears as a white to orange splotches on the underside of the leaves, and we'll provide some photos of what that looks like so you know what to look for. So for this question, what we're asking is, looking at the entire population of white-haired goldenrod plants within your rockhouse, is the amount of rust-covered plants high, medium, or low, or are the plants basically free of rust entirely? So this is obviously a very subjective question, so you can just answer to the best of your abilities. Next, we've got a few questions about disturbances that may occur in the rockhouses. And the first one asks about natural disturbances. This is a checkoff question where you can select one or more natural disturbances that are affecting the rockhouse habitat. You'll notice that this and the following question about human disturbances do not have a red asterisk next to it, meaning it's not a required question. So if the habitat and the plants are in very good condition, you may not see a need to tick any of the boxes in these categories. For natural disturbances, the kinds of disturbances that you might see are fungal rust. So you'd select this if you saw any in the question above. You might also see damage to goldenrod plants from insect herbivory. There's often a presence of invasive species in the habitat. Japanese stiltgrass is a very common invasive species to find. You may see browsing of the goldenrod plants from mammals like deer. There could be evidence of fire, and this would be a natural wildfire as opposed to a campfire. You may also see natural erosion occurring along the drip line, or there may be some erosion occurring if the rock house is very steep and some of the looser soil is slumping. You might also see some wind throw, like uprooted trees that have fallen on the goldenrod plants or elsewhere in the habitat. And finally, if you see anything else that looks like a plant disease affecting the goldenrod plants, excluding the previously mentioned fungal rust, you can just click Other Diseases. So going on to human disturbances, this is another checkoff question, and you can select one or more of the disturbances listed below. So that might include something like trash, like leftover food, garbage, wrappers, cigarettes, left behind camping gear, and such things as that. You might see campfire here, so charred remains in a sort of circular shape. A lot of people like to leave stacked rock cairns. You might also see soil compaction or trampling, such as a footpath that has sort of been clearly trampled through a patch of goldenrod plants. You could also see digging or evidence of digging. And this could be for plants in the habitat potentially. It may also be folks that have been digging for archaeological relics. Chalk on walls can be present from climbers that have been in the area. You might see graffiti or other rock wall carvings. And finally, you might potentially see evidence of logging, although this is probably the most unlikely option in this category. So under those disturbance checkoff lists, you're then asked to consider the entire rockhouse habitat as well as the entire goldenrod population there and estimate how much of both have been affected by whatever disturbances you saw and selected above in the percent increments shown here. Now, this is also somewhat of a subjective question. So again, you'll just do your best to select the best percent increment. So I'm going to pretend like I feel as though 5 to 15% of the rockhouse habitat has been affected by some disturbances that I saw. And for the plant population, it looks like maybe 15 to 30% of the plants have been affected. So that's the end of the white-haired goldenrod section of the survey. And we can now go on to look at the additional species section. So we'll look at plants and lichens first. So this part of the survey is for taking a quick inventory of all the plants you can identify within the rockhouse habitat. And for our purposes, we are defining the rockhouse habitat boundaries as simply the area behind the drip line of the rockhouse. So anything that occurs beyond the drip line is really outside the scope of our project's focus. So please just ignore all those plants out there and only focus on the plants that are within the rockhouse itself. So provided in this section is a drop-down menu, and it gives an abbreviated list of some of the very most commonly seen species in the assigned rockhouses. So we've included both common names and scientific names. In case you're only familiar with common names and you see a plant, you can just start typing in either name. So for instance, if you see maple leaf viburnum, which is Viburnum acerifolium, you can just start typing in maple, and the dropdown will sort of auto-complete to the best matches it finds. I'm going to pick maple leaf viburnum. You'll then enter an abundance code for that species. This is a relative estimate of how much of that species is present in the rockhouse habitat. These estimates are another subjective judgment call, and you don't need to worry too much about precision of estimate. For the most part, most species you see in the habitat will be occasional, frequent, or common, with just a few species falling in the very low or very high end of the estimate, so rare to abundant. So once you've entered your abundance estimate, can scroll down and click the plus button on the bottom right to add another species. And I'm going to guess I see Jack in the Pulpit in this because Jack in the Pulpit is in most of the rockhouse habitats. And I'm going to say it's frequent in the habitat. And you'll want to identify as many of the plants in the habitat as you can, but don't feel too much pressure to fill up the entire list. So if there's any plants that you can't identify, you can select the unknown at the top here, and then provide a brief description of the plant and add a photo and give an abundance estimate for the unidentified plant. So we'll say it's a shrub with opposite leaves and the leaves are smooth. And then you can take an image using this little camera button. Once again, we'll just pretend that that's a shrub. And we'll say, I saw it rarely in the habitat. Now, if you want to delete a species as you entered because you think you made a mistake, you can hit the delete button and it will delete the record that you're on. So to navigate back and forth through your selection of species, you can click the back and forth arrows. So when you hit the delete button, it'll delete the species that it's currently showing. So if I want to delete Jack in the Pulpit, I'll just scroll over to that there, hit the garbage button, delete, and there you go. I've only got 2 plants there. If you happen to see some characteristic or identifiable animals in the habitat, you can definitely add those observations to the section below the plants in purple. So let's say I saw antlion pits in the habitat. In that case, I would choose insects. And to classify the animal sign I saw, I don't know that antlion pits are really a nest and they're not really tracks, but maybe they're closest to tracks. You can kind of use your best judgment. And then if you like, you can take a photo of what you saw. So you would take a little photo of the antlion pits in the sand. And if you happen to see something like a snakeskin shed, you could choose reptiles. And we've got a very specific category for that one. And then you could take an image of the snakeskin shed if you like, and add any other observations about what you saw. And then at that point, you finished with the survey. So when you're all done, you go to the bottom right corner and you'll see this check mark, and you'll click that. And at this point, you can either send the survey, or if you just realize that you forgot a question or you want to add something or delete something, you can continue the survey. Or if you don't have a good internet connection, it will default and say save in the outbox. And if that happens, then you can just send the survey when you get back to an area with good data reception. So I'm going to say send now and see how that works. It'll go through all these little categories of the data that you sent, and if you've missed anything, it'll let you know immediately. It'll flag up whatever question you've missed that was required, and highlight it in red. But if you haven't missed any questions and all the data is complete, it'll just do that, and it'll send you right back to the very front of the survey. And at that point, you are done.